Okay, just for the heck of it, let's go ahead and go through a second example of how these weekly assignments are going to work. And so again, in whatever course module you happen to be in, you'll see some assignments. We click on example homework number 2. Again, notation, you'll have 30 minutes to complete this. Once you click on take the quiz, that's when the clock starts ticking. So take the quiz. Clock is running as you see up in the right hand corner. Go ahead and select on this file. As before, the file appears down in the bottom left hand corner. We click on that to open it. It opens in protected view. We need to enable editing. And again, to start, these are all random values. As you press any keys, the numbers all change. So again, the first order of business, using your mouse, go ahead and highlight those columns with the numbers in them. Right-click copy, right-click paste as values, and now we're good to go. Okay, a firm started the year with 300,833 shares of common stock outstanding. At the beginning of the third month of the year, so at the beginning of March, the firm issued 64,143 shares. At the beginning of the fourth month, or April, the firm issued a 23% stock dividend. At the beginning of the seventh month, or July 1st, the firm repurchased 30,593 shares. At the beginning of the 10th month, the firm had a 7-for-2 stock split. At the beginning of the 13th month of the year, oh, that won't work. Sorry, we're going to have to go ahead and change that to, let's say 11. Sorry about that. At the beginning of November, the firm issued 61,197 shares of stock. What were the weighted average shares outstanding over the course of the year? Now again, in the initial way the spreadsheet loaded, these were all random values, and whatever the values were here, they were simply inserted in each of these sentences up here. Down here at the bottom, you have this sort of cryptic thing called fixer. That's something that I needed to use in order to make up the problem. I wanted to have a stock split, and stock splits are always a ratio. In this case, 7-2. And what I didn't want to have was the same value for ratio 1 and ratio 2. So I didn't want to have a 5 for 5 stock split, because that's not a stock split at all. So basically, this was simply a device that I used to make sure that these two values weren't equal. It doesn't really have any meaning to you aside from that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. Again, this is something you should know from Intermediate Accounting 2 or the equivalent, wherever and whenever you happen to take it. So how do we do the weighted average shares outstanding? There are a couple ways we can do this. The way I've always done it, I take each transaction. We have our beginning balance. We adjust that for any subsequent stock dividends or stock splits. So first, we're going to have a 23% stock dividend in a few months. We multiply it by 1.23. And then we're going to have a 7-for-2 stock split. So we multiply it by 7 halves. So we've taken those initial 300,000 shares, we've increased them to account for the stock dividend, we've increased them to account for the stock split, and we say those shares will be outstanding through the end of the year, so we multiply that by 12/12. Next issuance, at the beginning of the third month, so the beginning of March, we issued 64,143 shares, so again, the number of shares, and we adjust that for any subsequent stock dividends or stock splits. So multiply it by 1.23 to account for the stock dividend, multiply it by 7 halves to account for the stock split, and now we say those shares will be outstanding from the beginning of March, the beginning of the third month, through the end of the year, so 10/12 of a year. Next, we have at the beginning of the fourth month of the year, the firm issued a 23% stock dividend. Again, that 23% stock dividend is already reflected in these earlier share amounts by virtue of us multiplying those share balances by 1.23. So as far as our table is concerned, The 23% stock dividend is not a separate event. It's sort of been incorporated in the earlier balances. At the beginning of the 7th month, so exactly halfway through the year, the firm repurchases $30,593. So minus $30,593. Again, we need to restate that to reflect subsequent stock dividends or stock splits. There are no subsequent stock dividends, but there still is that subsequent 7-for-2 stock split. Then we say, okay, that's 30,000 shares taken out of circulation, and they're going to be out of circulation for July through December, or 6/12ths. Got to get my parentheses in order there. 6/12ths of a year. And then finally, not finally, at the beginning of October, the firm had that 7-for-2 or 3.5-to-1 stock split. Again, that 3.5-to-1 or 7-to-2 stock split is already fully reflected in these earlier amounts because we adjusted each of those by multiplying by 7/2. At the beginning of November, we issued 61,197. So again, we multiply 61,197. We would adjust that for any subsequent stock dividends or stock splits. There are no subsequent stock dividends or stock splits. So those shares are going to be outstanding for November and December, 2/12ths of a year. So here are our transactions, and we add those up, and that gives us our weighted average shares outstanding. Now, if you simply submitted something that looked like this, I would not be the happiest person in the world because at first blush, I'm not sure what any of this means. You need to label things. So at a bare minimum, answer. So I know that this is in fact your answer. If you want to be a little fancier, you'd say this is my weighted average shares outstanding, something nice and explanatory, so I know what you're trying to tell me. So again, we do this, we say, okay, I'm done, maybe double check your calculations, make sure everything's good. Weighted average shares outstanding, and let's go ahead and format this nice and neat so your wonderful faculty member doesn't have to strain his old eyes trying to see this. Okay, so weighted average shares outstanding, 1,481,860.83. Let's go ahead and save this. File, save as, and again, I created a separate folder just for this. So example 2, solution. Okay, either minimize if you don't want to risk closing it just yet. Choose file to upload. Again, I just saved that file to right here. Double click, that loads it. Double check to make sure that's right. Module 0, example 2 solution. That's exactly what I want. And submit quiz. Okay, so again, this took about 8 minutes. Had 30 minutes available to do it, so there should have been enough time to do this. The time allotted, as I said previously, the time allotted will be, in my opinion, generous. It may not be enough if you don't know the material at all and simply say, look, I'm going to look at the question and then go back and try to learn what's necessary for that particular question. Got to go through and try to learn all the material first and then treat this as though you were taking a timed in-class quiz where you wouldn't have the leisure to go back and check all of your work. Okay,